the NFL does a really good job of, setting guys up for life after football. So I was in my, I want to say in my sixth season, going into my seventh year. I was at my sixth off season, I should say, going into my seventh year with the Arizona Cardinals. So I was like, I was starting to consider life after football. I'd already had two contracts. I was going into my third contract. So I'm like, you know what? I've had a great run, but I do need to start preparing for life after football.
Sure.
So ended up deciding that, hey, I do want to travel down the path of real estate, and I would like to have a license just so I'm versed with the terms, right? I had no prior experience. So I figured if I was going to take on an internship, I didn't want to just be a blank sheet. I at least wanted to have some familiarity with real estate terms, just lingo, and just have a feel for it. So I decided to, during that off season, take a real estate course for a brokerage license. So ended up taking that course, got familiar with the terms, did pass that course. But through the process of that, I realized, hey, I don't want to be a broker selling other people's assets. I would actually like to be, a developer. I like to create the assets being sold. So Kenny brought me in, and I tell you, within 2 weeks of being in his office, I had my first shot at a project, and the project being a fix and flip project.
Okay.
Had no prior experience, but I read a ton of books, was starting to familiarize myself with the terms of real estate, and I knew what had to happen. But again, you don't know until you're in it, until you know. And
Right.
so again, I think the biggest turning point was me accepting the job. Right? He goes, I have an opportunity. Do you want to take it? Because apparently, he had an investor who was supposed to perform. The guy had to fly out to Europe for whatever reason, and he was unable to perform. So there was a deadline on the closing.
Yeah.
And so I just stepped in, right? I had no prior experience, knew nothing about how to finance these deals. I'm
Right.
going straight out of pocket. Like
Uh,
I knew nothing other.
uh-huh.
But I was fortunate. I was fortunate that that one of the building inspectors realized this was my first go. He was familiar with me being a former Patriots player, so he kind of walked me through what I needed to know, at least to get that job done. And I
Great.
was fortunate to be able to squeak out a little small profit. But within that process of coming out of my own pocket and realizing that there's better ways to finance, I did
Right.
learn that I could leverage. So fortunately, again, I was able to squeeze out a little bit of a profit on that deal. And then learning how leverage worked, I was able to, dissect that profit into purchasing three more projects. So we have a pretty substantial fixed flip portfolio. And what makes our projects unique is they're all like A-class finish, top tier luxury. Obviously, if you go into the website, you can get a feel for that. But we did that with one specific crew. I had about 20 guys that were underneath me. We gave those guys benefits. They were, they belonged to us, right?
Right.
But what I learned is I was really being condensed down with how many places I could be at once while manning a crew of my own. So not only did I have a broker's license, I also had a contractor's license that I had gotten along the way as well. So I was able to pull my own permits. After that first debacle of that first project where guys didn't have any permits, I learned. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get the license.
Right.
But anyhow, manning that crew, I felt like when I really kind of took that 30,000-foot view of my business, I'm like, me manning this crew is really holding me back. And we were starting to really get into multifamily projects because, again, we were doing so many single families. It just started to make sense to do multi. And by
Right.
the time we got to multifamily, that dynamic did not work with me manning a crew. So,
Yeah.
I considered that it was right around COVID, so 2020, 2021. I decided I was going to trim the fat. I was going to cut off any additional overhang that wasn't, particularly expanding the business. And
Right.
so in doing so, I hired, this was more experimental, but I had hired two construction managers, each with their own set of carpenters, and I would continue, hiring the trades because I already had plumbers, electricians, and mechanics that had been working. They're independents, but they work exclusively for us because of the high volume. So I already
Yeah.
had the part figured. But what
Right.
I really needed was the manpower on the carpentry side. And so I hired two construction managers while I still had the crew of my own. And I had three different projects all in the same city. And I just kind of let them rip. I was like, I'm going to let them show me who's most fit for the gig.
Sure.
And in doing so, the crew that I had, they just started to naturally fade. Right. And then the two that I had hired were starting to really shine.
Yep.
So needless to say, I had gone ahead and severed ties with the former crew that I'd had for over 5+ years. They had grown with me, I had grown with them, but the time was it was at that point where we needed to split ways.
Yeah.
Well, in doing so, because having the two construction managers, meaning I didn't need to be on site. Those construction managers were manning the carpenters, manning the trades, and managing the flow of that project. I was in oversight. So when it came down to having the two, I'm still simultaneously doing many projects, putting each of those construction managers on top of several projects. I realized that I was actually gaining rapport more with one out of those two construction managers. So the other crew ended up getting fired, right? I had to let them go, but they had done a number of good projects for me. So it was a clean cut. But I just realized I had more rapport with another construction manager whose name is Charlie. So Charlie, since I brought Charlie on in like 2021, and since then he's developed over 100 units for me. So something unique about my business, which is just my wife and I, we haven't had any outside investment. Our portfolio as it stands, including fix and flips that have been bought and sold and projects that we have developed and hold, we're in the ballpark of about 100 million that we've done over the course of 10 years. A good portion, I'd say 40 million of that we sold, roughly about 60 million of that we hold. So we've been able to do that with, our own legs and feet, right? We haven't had anyone come in and do any of the lifting for us. We do have good financing where we've been able to get really good leverage, which has allowed us to, be our own equity. And so, we've gone over the experiment of what this would be like if we had someone put in equity on behalf of the project and then make a return based on that. So we've looked at it in a number of different ways, but I will say that the way that we do it does work. So I'd say, if anything, I'd be more happy to show people how to do what I do, rather than there be somewhat of a outside investment, if you will. So I'm starting to get into the rhythm of, perhaps even teaching, my philosophies and my processes. And then perhaps that may go in and may happen in a way where someone invests in a deal, is shadowing me, learns the ropes, and then then assume gets comfortable to then go do their own deals. I've mentored a number of Patriots players. I'm still very involved with the Patriots alumni. So I've mentored a number of guys, have had them meet me on site to walk through a project so that way they knew kind of like line item by line item what they should be looking for. And then from that, there's some players that have actually gone on to purchase real estate, after, some of those walkthroughs and whatnot. So just honestly, I just like to give back. I mean, because we've been able to, experience such a run, from jumping into this till today, we've had quite the run. So I'm at that place where I want to continue to expand, of course. But if there is a way for me to, walk people through or just give insights on how we do what we do or what's possible in real estate,